Are you ready for part 2 of some amazing tips and tricks on building your own fish room? Stay tuned. Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jason with Jadron Aquatics. Thanks for hanging out with me again. So today we are going to go over some more tips and tricks on building a fish room, whether it's 3 tanks or 3,000 tanks. If you guys did not see the first video, I had some really great tips in there. Had a lot of comments of other ideas down at the bottom. If you guys didn't see that, I will put that up above, a link up there. You guys be sure and check that video out first. So today, let's go ahead and let's walk around so I can show you some other great tips and tricks for your fish room. So one of the things that we talked about last video is building enough distance between your tank and your lid. Again, we said about 8 inches, so you have plenty of room to get your lid open, catch fish. But another great idea, if you've got the length behind your tanks, is to stagger your tanks. When I mean staggered, is sort of like what you see here. As if you see these 20-gallon tanks are sticking out about 6 inches past this tank. This allows you to have a smaller distance between your tanks because of the fact that they're recessed off of the front. And so therefore, whenever you go to open the tops, you don't have to worry so much about hitting the tanks above, and you get a lot of room to get in there. So that's a way to be able to lower the space if you want to be able to get more tanks high and use a tinier bit of space between those. Then you can just take those things and again recess them out. But whenever you do your lids for them, be sure you cut the lids, this piece of the lid about this size, so it's a lot easier to open them. If you have real long lids, then you're going to kind of run into the same problem of them not opening all the way. Okay, so the next thing that let's talk about filtration. What is the best way that Jason thinks to do filtration when you're doing a multiple tank scenario in a fish room? To me, by far the easiest, most cost-efficient way is to use either Matten filters or sponge filters. As you can see in these tanks here, we've got sponge filters. If you look back into these shrimp tanks here, you can see that we've got the Matten style filters. The Matten style filters are a little bit more expensive, but they provide a much bigger surface area for bacteria and fry and stuff to pick off on. But again, with the sponge filters, I use Hydro 5s in mine, which are about $6 or $7 a piece when you buy them in bulk. But the thing about it is, now if you wanted to go to hang-on backs on all of your tanks, yes, it would do a much better job of keeping the water clear. But the thing that you have to think about is every single one of those hang on the backs has to plug in. So now you have to come up with how in the world you're going to have. For instance, with me, with almost 100 tanks, if I had 100 hang-on-the-back filters, I would have to find some place to be able to plug in 100 different plugs. And that's already the problem that you run into with lights, is getting all of the lights plugged in. Luckily, with the lights that I have on some of these tanks, I've got an entire strip that covers 3 tanks at a time, so I don't have a plug for every single one. So that's the first problem with having hang-on backs. The second problem is the amount of electricity that they consume. They're going to consume a heck of a lot more electricity on a whole bunch of tanks than having a centralized air system. And so to go along with having the sponge filters, you need to have a centralized air system. So again, when you're planning out your fish room, you need to go ahead and plan out how you're going to do your centralized air and how you're going to set up the manifold system. So for instance, in my aquarium, in my fish room, you guys can see that because I have so many tanks now, I've got 2 different linear piston pumps. The reason that I chose these are a little bit more expensive, but they consume very little electricity and as you can hear, they produce almost no sound whatsoever. There's some other types of pumps that you can get that produce the same amount of air, but they eat up a lot more electricity, and they also create a lot of noise. But again, the manifold system, so what I would do is I would create an entire circular system out of PVC pipe. I think what I've used here is probably 1.5 inch pipe, and as you can see, I've made it so that it goes all the way around the room. Now granted, even if you don't have that many tanks yet, but you know the amount of area that you're going to use, I would go ahead and create this. This PVC pipe doesn't cost that much. So go ahead and make it so it makes it a complete circle around the room so that you can get away with just running one pump, and now you've got one pump that can push 50 to 60 different sponge filters. So that is a tremendous amount of money you're going to save on electricities, again, compared to a hang-on back filter. Okay, so that's kind of my idea on how to do filtration. So let's go over some other tips and tricks about how you're going to handle the heating and the cooling of your tanks. So we go back to the same argument again. Are we going to put a heater in every single one of our tanks? We run into the exact same problems that we do with the hang on the back filters. First of all, heaters consume a tremendous amount of electricity. Even on a 10-gallon tank, you're probably going to put a 100-watt heater in there, so that thing is consuming 100 watts all of the time. And with 50 or more tanks, that's going to get very, very expensive. So I would not use heaters in your tanks except for maybe ones that you specifically do certain things with. So for instance, this tank right here is the one that I do grow out on my angelfish. So I really want this tank to be about 82 degrees all the time. So that's the only reason that I have a heater in that one. But you'll notice in all my other tanks, except for maybe one or two, there are no heaters in them whatsoever. Okay, so we've made the determination, let's not use heaters in our tanks. So now we have to figure out, what are we going to do about the room? We have got to now climate control the room that we're in so that we don't have to have any type of heater in our tanks. So let's talk about one other thing that goes along with this, is the idea of having lids or not having lids. I know you're thinking, wait a minute, Jason, this has nothing to do with what we're just talking about, but actually it does. So your tanks, all these bodies of water in these tanks act as insulators to help control the temperature in your room also. And if you keep a lid on your tank where you keep your tank completely covered, it is going to be a whole lot less likely to do temperature changes or shifts because of the fact that all of that heat is being held in there by that lid. So I would use lids on all of your tanks for that. I mean, obviously to keep fish from jumping out, but for the main reason of being able to temperature control the tanks, to have them where they just have very little shift in their temperatures. Okay, so back to what we're going to do about the room that we're in. Now, again, the room that I have these in is in my garage. And so this wall that's right here, this wall actually is an inside wall. So this is already a fully insulated wall. Nothing to do with this wall. This wall right here is also a wall that's on the inside. It's fully insulated. Now this wall right here is a wall that I built. There's actually, the wall that has the brick on it is one more wall over. I actually built this wall about 2 feet or maybe 3 feet from that wall. And then that wall there, right behind there, is the garage door. So that wall is also a wall that I built and then I insulated. And so you have the choice. I've seen a lot of people that'll take garage doors and just insulate the garage doors, but I promise you, in the long run, taking the time to build these walls and insulating these walls is going to make things a whole lot easier, because that insulation that's on those garage doors just doesn't do that much. It does help, but you're not getting a sealed room. The whole idea of what you want to do is get this room sealed so that you have very little air leaking out and you have very little air from the outside that is leaking in. So again, my suggestion is build walls and make sure all 4 of your walls have insulation in them. Now the next thing is the ceiling. So we've got the ceiling here. Now this ceiling right here, above this ceiling is an attic. I'm in a 2-story house, but this is actually the attic part where there's no rooms that are above it. And so this being the garage, there was no insulation above me whatsoever. So again, this would not be a sealed room if I didn't insulate the garage too. So I went ahead and bought a bunch of the rolls of insulation and I ran it all the way. So this entire ceiling that you see in here, there's insulation running the entire length of both sides. So again, we've created a completely sealed environment to be able to climate control this thing very, very easily. So I'm able, in the winter, I just simply run this oil heated heater. And then in the in the summer, I run this portable air conditioner that, as you can see, the hose here exhaust into the attic. So I promise you, I am not spending very much on electricity out here in this room at all, because I've got all LED lights. I've only got these 2 linear piston pumps that aren't operating much. So now we've gone over what we're doing as far as getting the insulation and stuff and creating a sealed room. And so you guys that are up north, you guys that are doing it in basements, understand a lot of this stuff doesn't necessarily apply to you, because I don't really understand exactly how basements work. I think a lot of it is like cinder blocks with some sprayed insulation. So you're going to be dealing with the same purpose, where you're going to try to create a sealed room. But again, I don't know exactly how basements work, so you may be dealing with some other issues. So know that these tips and tricks are really more based upon having it in some type of room that is not your basement. Now, as we talk about these electricity issues, that's also something that you need to keep in mind, and has also been a problem that I've had to overcome, is how many breakers that you actually have out in your fish room. I had 2 that were out here, 2 15-amp breakers, and I also had to end up wiring 1 more. So that's something you need to keep in mind too. It doesn't take very much to fill up a 15-amp breaker, so be sure as you're plugging things in, you take the time to write those things down so you can keep a full count of how much electricity you're pulling, so you're not putting too much onto one single plug. All right. I hope these tips and tricks helped you guys. Really, I've really been enjoying doing this segment, because there's a lot of cool things that I wish I would have known when I started this out, and so I'll try to pass these things along to you guys. If you guys have some other ideas that you've thought of with some of these things that I've said, be sure and leave those comments down below. So thanks again, guys, and God bless.